Hello, happy Monday. How are we feeling? How are we doing? Are we already circling back in 2025 or are we feeling very energized and wanting to use those last few weeks of 2024 to in full energy? Today I have a question that I think a lot of people can. Sorry, I got a brain fog. Weirdly, it's a question about presentation, and it wasn't the best example of it. But sorry, I'm back. Yes, I think that today's questions could be very helpful to many people who maybe not really change careers, but to move to a more senior role. So kind of from the specialist to like a more managerial strategic role. And the question itself is that I moved from a specialist, more technical role to one where I am asked to deliver more workshops, trainings, join meetings with other team members to present. And I find it very stressful, and that's something that I'm not used to. It's a new skill set for me. Do you have any tips on how to communicate better so others will listen? And yeah, this is a kind of question that I've seen a lot. One case being, I work with Salesforce, where administrators who work only on like a technical, who would get a job and think they will mostly work on like only this like technical configuration, and then they are asked to be the product owner who actually deliver all those trainings, workshops, presents during different meetings and so on. But I'm also pretty sure that this is technology independent, and often as we move forward in our career, we get to have less of this like functional tasks, but more of actually involved sharing with others. So it is a different skill set. And of course, in this case, we can talk about so many different things, right? So what you say and how you say it, right? So how you say it, so everything about delivery, taking pauses, how you modulate your voice so that other can listen, versus being actually enthusiastic. And especially if you are on camera, you kind of need to add a little bit more. A little bit more of energy, rather than you would normally say if you met in real life. You can do a short test and record yourself on Zoom and talk in like an enthusiastic way, as if you were talking with a friend, right? Like disregard that you're in front of the camera, and see how it looks back to you. So kind of like camera kind of takes away a little bit of this enthusiasm. So there is a lot of things to watch out for in terms of your delivery, especially when you work remotely in front of the camera. So that's one part. But it will be difficult for me to say because I haven't heard you speak. Right, so that's something that you can record yourself and think and check for yourself, kind of like self-assess if you can maybe talk a little bit more in like a more animated way, like modulate your voice, maybe slow down, so that it's not like boring to listen. So that's definitely something that comes with practice. A lot of tips there. If you want like more particular tips, ask and let's do a follow-up. But I would start by recording yourself and seeing for yourself how you do it. So that would be kind of on the how and the delivery. And of course, that's also how I work one-on-one, so that we have during the calls also the time to practice. So that part I just wanted to kind of like note, like put a pin on it. But actually in this video today, I wanted to talk about a different part. So kind of like what you say, a little bit also how you say, but not in terms of modulations, but basically on the content. So what I've seen a lot in folks coming from more technical background is that they tend to talk a lot about like the technicalities, like this is the functions I made, and these are like the technical nitty-gritty. Maybe for you they are not nitty-gritty, but like technical details, technical information about how a certain feature was built, or a certain piece of problem, or like certain technology that you are researching, where my very first advice would be to really think, when you are preparing to present, think who is your audience, and adjust your message to them. So if you talk with business teams, I'm sorry to tell it, to break it to you, they mostly don't care. They mostly don't care what kind of API it is. They don't care if it's a declarative solution, or they really don't care. They don't care. I know it's sad. And if you're proud of what you've built, and you are actually interested in this, like how it's built, I know it can be pretty sad to not share it, but you really need to adjust your message to your audience. So, for business teams, it's probably, it's why do they need it? What do they get away from whatever you're teaching them on, from whatever change you are telling them about, whatever workshop. So really focusing on the value for them and the business value, mostly the business value for them. So really understanding the why, and to better understand it for you, ask them more questions. What's most important for them? So really focusing on the why. Why was the change introduced? Why is it important for them, rather than on technicalities? And of course, if you talk with a more like a group of developers or a more tech savvy group, then of course adjust the message accordingly. And you don't have to explain what an API is, because they will know, right? So really adjust your message to your audience. So what do they care about? What language do they use? And that's also very important. I mentioned some jargon, right? Like for you, it can be obvious, but for them, probably not. Especially if you explain technical terms, this could be more difficult. So if you can think of like a metaphor, ideally to something that they can visualize, or something related to their work, so something that they will quickly, that will help illustrate the idea, would be very helpful, so that that they understand what you talk about. And if you can use their vocab, that would be amazing. That would really help land the message. So one example that comes to my mind, and I told you, I've been working with Salesforce, so kind of like potential buyers were called leads, right? And in like the business language, lead is a kind of a frequently used word. But one time I was introducing Salesforce to a university, and for them, these were actually applicants to university. If I told ladies from the dean's office that this is how we convert the lead, they would look at me as if I'm like, what? Like, because they don't convert leads. They check they review the applications of the applicants to the university, who later become students if all the documents are correct, right? So I wasn't using leads and contacts. I was saying applicants and students, right? So adjust the language to the audience, and adjust the message, most important points to the audience, and explain jargon and explain words that might be difficult. They might not know what they mean. Try to illustrate them, and focus on the value rather than how, right? If you're talking to a business team. So that in terms of the content. but also another, sorry, what's going on? Another big part is structure, right? Like you want whatever your presentation is to have the right structure. So there is the beginning, there is some middle part, and there is some end. There is some conclusion. So if when you prepare, look at the train of thought, right? So that it's not like a scattered, a little bit here, a little bit there, a little bit there. If you are explaining like how certain function on process work, try to come up with a persona and say it from their perspective. So kind of like create this story that this is what happens, then that's what happens, then this, then this, then this. So there is this like logical flow. Or if something happens, then something else. We as humans learn better with stories. So, and that's especially like I'm thinking of what kind of situations could it be relevant for you, but especially if there are some processes or how you use something, think of a scenario and create a story around it. So it doesn't have to be anything fancy, like, like no drug consent and whatever you have, but just add a little bit of storytelling so that it's easier to follow, right? So instead of we click here, it was like, imagine you're Agata from project management. So she starts her day by checking the status of all her projects. So that's what she does next, right? So kind of like make it a story. And that will also help with the structure. So again, go through it. If you are starting out, if you are a beginner, you can ask some of your friends. I mean, of course, like NDA and like be mindful of all of that, but ask someone you trust who doesn't know that much about the topic that you're presenting about, and ask them if that makes sense to them, if this structure makes sense to them. So that would be also very helpful. If you can add some visual aids, or demonstrate something and do like a little prototype, amazing, to kind of like enhance the message and enhance the storytelling when you can actually see what you mean. So if you have an access to that would be also very helpful. And I think another tip, like last 2 tips. So it's better to say less than to overwhelm people. So I don't want to say like one presentation, one message, because it's usually like a, kind of like a longer process, but kind of try to keep maybe one part, one message, take a break, check if everyone understands and are good to, it's kind of like one key point per part would help the audience kind of understand the main points and kind of see where one part ended and another began. Also, you can do it by adding more pauses in how you speak to kind of like signify that, okay, we are now moving to the next part. But it's better to say less and maybe do a follow-up than try to overwhelm people and just like overwhelm them with information. If you're using slides, you probably know it by now, because I feel like everyone's talking about it, at least in my world. Don't make it a dissertation on the slide. Nobody would read it and nobody would listen to you. So it would be difficult to kind of like maintain this attention. And there was last part, but I didn't write it down. And I didn't write it down and I forget. Oh, I know, sorry. Yeah, you can write down, like I have my notes. The last point came to me when I was speaking, so I didn't write it down, but having like a list of core points, also very helpful, especially when it's structure. Last point, bonus point, not included here. Think of ways to engage the audience. So asking some questions. If you are on Zoom, Google Meet, whatever, you can ask them to add reactions to a chat, do some icebreaker. Really think of ways to engage. Maybe they can practice something or ask them to give examples. So really, I don't want to say force, but make it easier for them, like enable the audience to participate. If you're worried that they will not be doing it. Another tip when you are trying to engage the audience, ask simple questions. So one question at a time. So what do you think about this, and then about this, and about this? No, this will not work. One question at a time. Ideally a simple one. That would be easier, for them to reply to it. When we ask compound questions, it's more difficult to answer it in a way that doesn't derail the conversation. So these were my top tips. So to sum up, adjust your message to the audience, words that you use. What do they care about? Value rather than how. Structure your second tip is structure your presentation. Ideally, try to come up with a form of story using a person, so using like a person's story, so it will be easier for the audience to follow up. Third, if you have some visual aids, demo of the system, some prototype, use it to help visualize, but also make sure that it doesn't take away from what you are saying, right? So also maybe you can share a screen and then pause sharing it so that people are not distracted from what you're saying. Fourth one, say less rather than overwhelm the audience. And the fifth one is try to engage the audience with some simple questions, reactions, maybe a poll, some exercises, so that they can better engage and also make this session more useful. And tip 0, so before I shared all of this, was really record yourself on Zoom, Google Meet, and see how you actually show up. Because you might be surprised how, especially on camera, differently you sound than you think. And last parting words is try to also make it interesting for yourself. Because if you are bored with what you're saying, then there's no way you can make it interesting for other people. If speaking there is so boring and you're just like, don't want to be there, then other people wouldn't like to listen to it as well. So try to make it more interesting for yourself, and then it would be easier for you to sound interesting to other people. I know sometimes with work presentations, they can be really dry. I know, but also use it as an opportunity to try doing something differently, right? Like, it doesn't have to become a stand-up comedy show. But you can maybe sprinkle some form of personality or make it more engaging by, for example, sharing a story relevant to your business, obviously, and make it more interesting. And I hope this helps. If you have more questions, of course, let me know. If you want to work with me one-on-one to support you with preparing such presentations and preparing for presenting at work, structuring those presentations, and also helping you with delivery, feel free to DM me and we can talk more about mentoring programs. If you have more questions for this Ask Agata Agony edition, also send me a DM with your questions that I will take into account for future videos. And I think that's it for now. I hope it was helpful. Let me know what you think. If you have any other pieces of advice that I didn't include here because say less, then feel free to add, and I would love to hear from you. And yeah, with that, see you next time.